I asked you your opinion of Steve Sarkisian, and boy, did you deliver. Steve Sarkisian, head coach at Texas, about to enter his third year. Great trivia question. Where was he a head coach before at Texas? And the answer is Alabama. No, he wasn't. He was the offensive coordinator at Alabama. Except the Iron Bowl in 2020, when he was the interim because Nick Saban had to stay home due to the evils of COVID. Break that out at your next college football trivia night. See how many people get it. Steve Sarkisian, 1-0, undefeated as a head coach at Alabama. There is no head coach in America that could change the perception of himself more in 1 year than Steve Sarkisian this fall in Austin. They're favored to win the Big 12. If they do it, they'll be right there in college football playoff consideration. They got a stacked quarterback room. They got a stacked wide receiver room. They're recruiting very, very well. The opinion that I got more often than not from you today is no one questions his acumen as an offensive coordinator, as a play caller. He is lethal in both of those categories. But the most popular refrain from you, and this was not a surprise to me, was, think he's a great play caller, great offensive coordinator. I've either got questions about him as a head coach or I just don't think he's a good head coach. It was something along those lines. So I'll address that in a second. But there were several of you, in fact, a surprising number of you, who said, I think this is a make or break year for Steve Sarkisian. No, it's not. This is not a make or break year for him. Let me ask you a question. What do you mean by break? Do you mean if he doesn't win a certain number of games, he's fired? Is that what you mean? Certainly, if they go 9-3 in the regular season, they haven't arrived, but he's not getting fired. So what are we talking about? That phrase is thrown around far too loosely in college football. They hope for more than 9-3, but I can confidently tell you, if Sark goes 9-3, number one, that means he improved on last year's record and will have improved every year he's been at Texas. And number two, he will be back to lead the Longhorns in 2024. It is not a make or break year. If they go 4-8, then you start having a different conversation. I don't think they're going to go 4-8 this year. Then again, I said A&M was disaster-proof last year, and we saw how that worked out. So no promises, but I feel pretty confident about that. Steve Sarkisian also has had a very public battle with alcoholism in the past. I respect anyone who's public about that. I've watched it before up close. It is disgusting. I mean, it's something that I don't think is properly talked about in just the mainstream conversation, because a lot of folks haven't been around it. Many people haven't experienced it. I haven't experienced it personally. I eliminate it from the equation. I don't drink at all. That's the only way to 100% guarantee it. But I've watched people go through it, and you can so clearly tell people who have gone through it or personally witnessed it close up versus people who haven't. The ones who haven't are the ones who joke about it and are flippant about it, which I think is kind of pathetic. And I saw a lot of that today. That is what it is. I'm not going to traffic in that. But Steve Sarkisian is a guy who, because of those sorts of external factors, really cost himself early opportunities in his career. This is nothing that he hasn't spoken about publicly, and I respect the heck out of anyone who will talk about it publicly. And so he goes to Alabama. There were hiccups at Alabama. I remember one year, they were on the field celebrating. First time I ever talked to Steve Sarkisian, they were on the field celebrating. And ironically, he did the same thing Kiffin would do. When Alabama would be celebrating winning the SEC or even a playoff game or a national title, he and Kiffin, when they were there respectively, they would stand off to the side. They would stand off out where the media is standing on the field, and they would just kind of watch from afar. They wouldn't be up on the stage. They'd be out of the spotlight. And I walked up to him, I said, man, I want you to know I'm really, really happy for you. And he said, man, I appreciate that more than anything you'll know. Just moved right along. But I remember that because I felt it. I didn't say it to him just to, introduce myself. I said it to him because he had been really open about the battles that he had faced, just inner demons, just stuff that has nothing to do with football that obviously impacts football. And it's very, very well documented how it went down at Washington. It's very well documented how he sort of resurrected his career at Alabama, and now he gets a shot at Texas. And there are a lot of folks out there, every bit within their right, to doubt whether he'll ultimately be the guy who brings Texas back. But I'm just telling you, if he does, and they're recruiting very well right now, and they're trending very well right now. If he does, think about the added layer. I mean, think about the the story that is, and sort of the motivational aspect, the motivational layer that's woven in there, maybe for people who don't even care about college football. You get a guy who is in the depths of alcoholism, completely rehabilitates his image, competes at the highest level of the sport, goes to work for the best in the world in Nick Saban, gets his endorsement to the point where I don't think I ever saw Nick Saban yell at him. Saban would chew Kiffin's head off every other quarter in Tuscaloosa. Sark was so lethal at Alabama. Saban thought to himself, what can I say to this guy? That's how good Steve Sarkisian was as a coordinator and a play caller. And if he goes through that and then he goes to Texas and undertakes what the Texas head coaching job is, by the way, it's a job and it's a situation that has been thought by some in the past to be unwinnable because of all the mess you have to deal with internally. If he, of all people, dealing with what he's dealt with in his personal life, is the one who goes in there and who navigates those waters and brings Texas back just as they're about to enter the SEC, mind you, think about what kind of story that is in the history of college football, not just Texas, in the history of college football. So I watch it from that vantage point. Like, that's what I look at. And also, if you want my personal opinion on this, I think he's really good. I think Steve Sarkisian is being treated sort of like many other younger head coaches are. Now, Sark is not as young or as wet behind the ears as a Lincoln Riley when he was at Oklahoma, or Kirby at Georgia, or Ryan Day at Ohio State. Sark had head coaching jobs before. He messed them up. And then he worked his way back up, got another shot, and now he's got one of the big boy jobs in college football. But it's sort of the same process in place. So some of the same mechanisms are in place. People looking at him like they look at Lincoln Riley, like they look at Kiffin sometimes, like they look at Ryan Day. Yeah, these guys are really good offensive minds. And yeah, man, their offense, any given Saturday, it can score 50 on you. But is the culture conducive to playing the kind of defense that you have to play? The overall team football aspect, is it conducive to playing championship caliber football? So far, the answer's been no at Texas, but then again, they had to rebuild at Texas. They didn't necessarily have to rebuild at Oklahoma or Ohio State. They got to rebuild at Texas, and that's the point. They've been doing it. And here's why I think it's ultimately going to work out. I think Steve Sarkisian will be a successful head coach at Texas. I strongly, believe it or not, believe in him this year. The reason is because he has not gone in there and just littered his roster with a bunch of wide receivers and running backs, quarterbacks. He's gone in there and rebuilt the line of scrimmage. He's got a really, really good recruiting staff. I mean, they got over a century of NFL experience in that coaching room. Those guys know what they're doing. And that also indicates, by the way, there are a lot of folks perfectly willing to tie their name to the name Steve Sarkisian. You may not think about that as being significant. It is. Coordinators, position coaches, yeah, they make a lot of money when they go to Texas, but they also know if they hitch their wagon to a losing horse, sometimes it can torpedo their career. So guys have to be shrewd about those moves, just like head coaches do, just like recruits do. They got the players. And when you have the players and you're never going to hurt in the quarterback room, I'll tell you this. If I had to go against them, if I were looking at Texas and Texas was my rival, or I knew I was going to deal with Texas, you can laugh at them right now if you want to. If I were a coach and I knew what Sark was capable of, I would be terrified of him getting the entire cultural aspect figured out. Because Texas with culture figured out is a superpower in college football. It's happened before, hadn't happened in a while. A lot of you apparently don't think it can happen with him. Hey, that's the fun of watching the games get played, man. Like it's as fun and as serious as that on Saturday.